All right, so everyone should be seeing my browser right now, and good evening and thanks for joining us. So once again, my name is Michael Turner. I work for the state of New York for New York State Higher Education Services Corporation, or HESC, which is your state financial aid agency. We'll talk a little bit about our application process for New York financial aid once we cover the main focus tonight, which is how to survive the FAFSA. So I'm going to be doing a live demonstration of how to submit the FAFSA and talking a little bit about some of the common areas where students make a mistake. And if you've already started FAFSA, you're welcome to log into your FAFSA and maybe follow along. If you haven't started FAFSA, you're welcome to start your FAFSA. Or if you've already done your FAFSA and you see some parts where you may have made a mistake, you're welcome to also log back into your FAFSA and try to make corrections. So you definitely want to follow along and make sure that you're absorbing this information, because we want to make sure we get FAFSA as correct as possible, because it's a really super important form for our financial aid. So I'm on the FAFSA homepage, which is fafsa.gov. You get a little bit of a redirect here. And you can either start here or log in. It really is up to you, depending on if you've started the FAFSA before or if you're a first-time user. When you go into the FAFSA, you'll have this login option where you can start as the student, or you can start it as a parent of a student. So if I was starting as a parent of a student, it would ask me to put in the student's name, last name, their social, and everything like that. If I'm a student, they're gonna ask me to log in using my FSA ID. Your FSA ID is basically the account that you create for FAFSA, the username and password that you use to sign into the form. And if you don't have one of these, you definitely should create one, and they give us an option right here to create it. And that'll redirect you to this website, the FSA ID page, where you can go through the process of registering. It's very similar to any other websites, like a social media page or anything. If you're a first-time user, you sign up, you make a username, a password, but it is associated with your social security number and other identifying information, so it's a little bit of a long registration. Now, you have to make one of these for the student, but also the student's parent must also create one of these if they have a social security number, because there's going to be a part of FAFSA I'll show you later where you could download the parent tax information through something we call the IRS data retrieval tool, which will require your parent to have a username and password to use that. But if your parent doesn't have a social, then you can skip this part for the parent. You wouldn't make your parent an FSA ID unless they have a social. But all students who are filing FAFSA definitely 100% should have an FSA ID. Now, some students will say, oh, sometimes, Mr. Turner, I forgot my account, I want to reset it. You just click on manage, and then you can do all of that stuff. You can say you forgot your username, you forgot your password, and you can reset your own account. So the way I'm going to go into FAFSA is I'm going to go in as if I'm a parent of a student, and we're just going to make up a student here. So I'm going to say the student's first name is Elmo, and the student's last name is Monster, just to put a name on it. And this is just a demonstration site, so I'm going to use whatever I want for the social security number. Obviously, if you're a student or a parent of a student, you would be using your actual identifying information in order to fill this out. So once everything looks good, you always want to make sure that when you click next, it'll ask you to double check to make sure that we're using the right information for this student. It's really important that we use the right social security number when we do FAFSA. One of the most terrible mistakes you can make with FAFSA is putting the wrong social and doing a whole FAFSA only to learn that you put the wrong social. Beyond this point, we can't change it. So if I go next and I have the wrong social and I find out sometime later in the form, I basically have to start all over again, because I did a whole FAFSA under basically a fake identity. So now either you've logged in or you put your information and now you're in, you read the terms and conditions and you accept, and then it asks you which year are you applying for financial aid. If you're a senior in high school right now trying to go to college next year, you're going to use the option on the left, which is for 2021, 2022. You do not want to do the 2021 because that's for students who are currently in college. You're going to college next year. Then when you get in here, it's going to ask me to create a save key. A save key is basically a short little password in case I don't finish my FAFSA today. If I do finish FAFSA, they're not going to store this save key. They're going to get rid of it. But let's say I'm working on FAFSA and in the middle of it, I have something to do, or I get a phone call, I have to stop working on my FAFSA, I want to save it, I want to log out. If I want to resume this FAFSA application later, they're going to ask me to remember what save key I created. Basically, save key is like short for password. in order to open the FAFSA. So you can make this whatever you want this save key to be, but just make sure that you keep it in case you don't finish. You're going to need it later on. If you do finish the FAFSA, they're going to get rid of the save key, and you won't need it because obviously you haven't saved your application. You submitted it. It's all done. So now we're going to go next, and you always have to be patient with FAFSA. Sometimes the screens may hang for a while. You see it's spinning, it's loading. Sometimes, you can get impatient. You'll start refreshing your browser. You'll hit back on your browser. Those are all things that will mess up your FAFSA. So if you ever see it like this where it's spinning, you just give it a second, you take a sip of water, you kind of just wait until it finishes doing its thing. So now we've got our introduction page where it's going to tell us some steps about completing the FAFSA. You could read this if you want. We're just simply going to go next because I'm going to be walking you through. And now you notice we're on what we call the student information page. So they want to know everything about our student. So we're not going to be putting our parents' names and information here. This is all about the student, and this is copied from either the information in the student's FSA ID or the information I just used to log in. You notice I can't change my social. So at this point, I've gotten past the point of no return. So I better make sure this is the right social before I go any further because this social is locked in. I can fix my name. You always want to make sure your name matches your social security card. So if you have a middle name, even if you don't use it, but it's on your social security card, your middle name or middle initial, you want to definitely put it on here and make sure that everything is correct, including your birthday. So once all that's in there, we're going to have some more basic questions. So everything so far is very easy. So we have, what's the student's email address? You could use whichever email address you prefer to use here, if it's your high school email or if it's your personal email. And then whatever phone number you want to use, your cell phone, house number, things like that. Your home address, another thing that's very basic. So we're just going to put our home address, and we're going to then keep moving forward. So New York, and then our zip, and then we go next. Have we lived in New York State for 5 years? Now, there are common mistakes that are made here that I want to emphasize. They want to know, for me, the student, how long have I been living in New York? If I've been living in New York my whole life, then I would simply say yes, and I keep it moving. If I just moved to New York a year ago, then I'll say no to this question, and they're going to ask me, what is my state of legal residence? Now, they assume it's New York. Now, if I live somewhere else right now, let's say I just moved to New Jersey, I would change it to New Jersey. But if you're currently living in New York, this should be left at New York. One mistake that students make is they say, well, I moved to New York a year ago. Before that, I was living in another country. So I'll change my state to another country or New Jersey or something else. If you're not currently living in another country or you're not currently living in another place, then you want to make sure that this is set to New York, because it's going to affect whether you're able to apply for financial aid in New York State. If you tell FAFSA you're currently living somewhere other than New York, they're not going to let you continue on to apply for your state financial aid. So, and we'll see where that works a little bit later. Now, it's asked me, did I become a legal resident of New York before 2016? No, I moved here a year ago. So all I have to do is enter the month and the year that I first moved to New York. So let's say I moved to New York in November of 2019. So all I got to do is put the month and the year, and then I keep moving. So you're just basically telling FAFSA, no, I haven't lived in New York for 5 years, but I started living in New York as of this month and this year, and make sure that your legal state of residence is set to New York, and then you keep moving forward. Now they want to know about the citizenship immigration status of the student. In order to qualify for federal aid, you must be able to answer the first or second option. So if you're born here or you have your naturalization, you're a citizen of the US, you would put the first one. If you are not a citizen, but you have your resident status, you have permanent resident card, or you have like an approved asylum status, then you're going to say the second option that says I'm an eligible non-citizen, and they're going to ask you to give you something called an alien registration number. The alien registration number is a number from your permanent resident card or from your citizenship document, and we typically call that the US CIS number. So if you were to look at your permanent resident card, on the front of it, there would be a number that says US CIS number, and that would be the number that you're going to enter into your FAFSA for this question here. So you would put that number in here. You're not putting your social or anything like that. You're entering the number from the front of your permanent resident card, the USCIS number, or the number that's on whatever documentation you have that either indicates your alien registration number or refers to your USCIS number. So this is another common mistake, because when FAFSA verifies that you're currently a permanent resident, they're going to check this number. So if you make something up, or you put your social in here, or you put something else, that could mess up the verification of your citizenship status, which can cause issues with both your federal and your New York State financial aid for the TAP application, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And go ahead.
Sorry, I just was going to interrupt briefly in case there are any U.S. citizens, but citizens by naturalization as opposed to citizens who were born in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about the verification process? Because what I have discovered is that for our students who say yes to being citizens of the United States because they are, but who weren't born here, there are sometimes some extra hoops they have to jump through.
Yep. So what happens is that what you're supposed to do when you change your status from being a permanent resident to a naturalized citizen is you're supposed to update the Social Security Administration about your citizenship status. And what a lot of people do is they don't do that. So if you are currently a permanent resident and you have a Social Security number and you have a permanent resident card, the government, through the Social Security office, they have you as whoever you are, and they have your citizenship as a permanent resident. When you get your naturalization, they are not automatically updated that you're no longer a permanent resident, now you're a citizen. You're supposed to go on your own, and they tell you as part of your, kind of next steps of what to do for immigration, is that once you get your naturalization, you're supposed to contact the Social Security office and tell them that you're no longer a permanent resident, that you've become a naturalized citizen. And if you don't do that, but you go on FAFSA and you tell FAFSA, oh yeah, I have my citizenship, I'm no longer a permanent resident, FAFSA is going to check, and when they run your Social Security Administration is going to say, no, we don't have them as a citizen, we have them as a permanent resident still. And then what will happen is you'll get a message from your colleges, you'll also get a message from New York State saying that FAFSA couldn't verify that you're really a US citizen, and will ask you for proof of your citizenship information, like a passport or your naturalization certificate or whatever. So if you want to avoid having these issues and you are currently a naturalized US citizen, you want to make sure that at some point your family contacts the Social Security office and tells them that, the kids in the family are no longer permanent residents, they're now US citizens. They'll collect a copy of your naturalization certificate and they'll update their records. That way they no longer associate you with a permanent resident status. So yeah, that's a very good question. Now, if you're not a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, then you wouldn't be qualified for federal aid. So for example, if you're a DACA student, so you have the Deferred Action Program, you could still fill out FAFSA because you have a social, but in the end, they're not going to qualify you for any federal aid. New York State does have the DREAM Act application, which allows you to apply for state financial aid. So it would really be up to you as to whether or not you want to file FAFSA. Maybe you have to do it for a scholarship or something like that, where they want you to still file FAFSA, but you're not going to get any benefit from filing FAFSA if you're not a US citizen or not a permanent resident. So keep that in mind. So once we go here, we get a pop-up message. It looks like we didn't go forward. It's giving us a reminder that at the end of FAFSA, there's a link that lets us apply for New York State financial aid. So they want us to look out for that option when we submit our FAFSA, and we'll revisit that. So now we have this screen here, wants to know more student information about our education plans. They want to know when we finish high school, what kind of degree are we going to get from our high school program? So you're in a traditional high school, you're not like in a GED program. So you're going to say the high school diploma is what you're going to get. And then they're going to ask you, when you go to college, what degree or certificate you'll be working on. Now, these aren't trick questions, because sometimes students will ask me, they say, oh, Mr. Turner, I don't know. I want to go to a 4-year college, but I might start at a 2-year. I don't know. Here you could put your preference. So if you say, look, my goal is to try to get into a 4-year college, then say you're going to be going for your first bachelor's degree. If you know for sure that you're going to be going to a 2-year community college, you can put an associate's degree for general education or transfer. So it's really up to you. These questions are really not going to affect your financial aid unless by accident you put that you're in graduate school. If you're going to graduate school, you don't get the same financial aid as you get for undergrad. So you can use any of these options for first bachelor's or associates, or you don't know, which is the other undecided, but do not put that you're going for a graduate or professional degree. So we're going to say the student wants to work on their first bachelor's degree. They want to go to a 4-year college. Will the student already have a bachelor's degree before they start college? No, the student's still in high school. And what is going to be their college grade level? Everyone's going to put never attended college first year. Now, the reason why you want to put that, even if you've taken some college classes, maybe you've done college now, maybe you did a summer program where you took a college class over the summer, you've never been enrolled fully in college. So no one in high school has been enrolled in college before because you're not currently a high school graduate. So everyone's going to put that they've never attended college first year. Do not by accident put that you're a 4th-year senior. Sometimes when we're reading FAFSA, we kind of gloss over the questions and we see grade level and we're like, yeah, I'm a senior. They're not talking about what grade you are right now in high school. They're talking about what's going to be your grade when you go to college next year. And then the last question, are we interested in work study? Work study is an opportunity to work for our colleges and earn grant money that we can use to help pay for school in case we don't get enough free money to afford to go to college from grants and scholarships. So if you're interested in work study, you can say yes. If not, you can say no, or you can put I don't know. So we're going to go next. Male or female. So here they want the gender assigned to the student at birth. If you're a male student, they're going to ask us, have we registered yet for selective service? Selective service is the military draft registration. So if you're a male student and you've never heard of this, you're going to say no, because obviously you've never heard of it. And then they're going to say, would you like us to register you for the selective service? Selective service would put you in case there's a military draft, your name could be called. It is a requirement of all students that they, if you're a male between the age of 18 and 26, that you do be registered. It could affect your federal financial aid if you're not registered. If you're not yet 18, maybe you're still 17, you could say no to this, but at some point down the road, they will want you to register. Now, I'm not gonna spend too much time on selective service. Will you get drafted? Are they gonna send you to Iraq or Afghanistan? There's a website I just put into chat, sss.gov, which is the site for selective service. So you can read more about that requirement, and then you'll be prepared for how you're gonna answer this question on FAFSA. They're gonna ask the student if they already have a driver's license. If not, they could leave it blank, so we're gonna leave it blank. And they're gonna ask, has our student ever been in foster care? We're gonna say no. And then how far did our parents get in their education? Once again, it's not a trick question. It's not gonna affect our financial aid. They're just trying to gather some data about the student. For example, they wanna know, is this student the first in their immediate family to go to college? So let's say I am, because my parents only got as far as finishing high school, then my colleges would know that I'm a first-generation college student. So now we get to the part where it's an important screen where we're going to be finding the name of our high school. Now there's a search process where we have to enter the name of our high school, the city and the state, and we're going to confirm it. And FAFSA will give us a list of options to select our high school from. So you guys go to a long high school name. So here's a little trick, and this is going to be important when we're doing the colleges. You don't have to enter the full name of your high school in order to find your high school. As long as you put in part of the name of the school, the city where it's located, so I believe you guys are technically Forest Hills.
Michael, we are, but we're listed as being in Rego Park for whatever reason, so yeah.
So Rego, so we'll put Rego, and then we'll put New York. So now I'm gonna search the system for any high school in Rego Park that says the name Metropolitan. And even if we didn't, let's take out Rego Park. Say we didn't know what city we're technically in. We're gonna hit confirm. The system is gonna search all high schools in New York State that have the name Metropolitan in it. And then I can basically go through and see which one of these schools is mine. And what, there's MELS right here. So I would then select it. And then you notice now they filled it in for me, all caps. I get a green check that it's added to my application. And now I no longer need to confirm it. I could just go next. So this is how you properly enter your high school. If you just type MELS and Rego Park or Queens and then go next, your high school is not going to be properly stored to your application. And then that's going to affect you know, your school when they're trying to figure out, did you file FAFSA or not? They get reports that tell them students who've completed FAFSA. If your high school name is not properly entered this way, they're not going to know that you ever file FAFSA, because there are going to be different random things that students are naming the school, and they're not going to be saved into the database. They're not going to be stored to your application. So now that we've finished our high school, they want us to do the same process of searching and selecting our colleges. Now they know you're not accepted to college yet. Maybe you haven't even fully applied yet for college. Maybe you're still finishing your applications. You can still enter the names of colleges that are in consideration right now. For example, if you're working on your CUNY app and you know you're applying to 6 different CUNY schools, you can start by listing those schools. For CUNY, you have to list every individual college. You can't just type one word CUNY and that covers you for all your schools. So if you're applying to Queens College, you'll have to find them and select them. If you're applying to Brooklyn College, you'll have to find them and select them. But here's a cheat sheet. If I know I'm going to CUNY, CUNY's in New York, I'm going to put New York for the state. And then instead of typing all these different cities and school names, I'm simply going to type the word CUNY, and then I'm going to search that. And the system is going to find for me all the different colleges in New York State that have the word CUNY associated with it, and I get a whole list, 18 different schools. And what I can now do is I can scroll up and down this list and select the colleges I know I'm definitely applying to or have already applied to. So let's say I'm doing Hunter College, Brooklyn, Baruch, so on and so forth. You see it's keeping a tally. Every time I check a school, it's telling me how many schools I've selected. The maximum number of colleges that you can select on FAFSA is 10. So what I would do here is, let's say I'm doing my CUNYs and I want to add more schools, because not only am I doing CUNY, maybe I'm also doing SUNY. So for SUNY, I could use the same kind of cheat sheet that I did with CUNY. Put no city, put New York for the state, type the word SUNY, hit search. And then I'm going to have 30 plus SUNY schools, 32 schools that I could look at. So yep, oh, Binghamton's on my list. I'm selecting them, SUNY Albany, SUNY Buffalo, and you notice my list. Now I have 6 schools. And then maybe I'm doing private schools. Maybe I'm doing additional colleges. I would keep adding more schools until either I'm done or I max out at 10. Because once I've selected 10 schools, they're not going to let me select any more. So once I've selected all my schools, and what they're going to tell me is they're going to give me a list of all the different schools that I've selected. What I would have to do on the screen is tell them what my housing plans are. Am I going to live on campus? Am I going to commute from my parents' house? Or am I going to live off campus, which means am I going to get my own apartment in the town or city where my college is and basically commute from my own apartment, not from my parents' place, from my own apartment. Most students are selecting either on campus or with parent. What if you selected one of these colleges by accident? What if you want to take them off? Well, all you would have to do is press this plus button, and it allows us to then get additional options to either remove or reorder these colleges. The order of the colleges does not matter, so you don't have to list your top choice in the first spot on FAFSA. And the reason why is that the other schools that you're submitting for, they're going to have no idea who else you listed on FAFSA. They're going to get a copy of your FAFSA, but they're not going to have any clue what other colleges you applied to, so they're not going to know if they were listed first, second, or third. So order really doesn't matter. But they do let you reorder if you want. Now, what if you're applying to more than 10 colleges? Well, if you were to submit FAFSA tonight for these schools that you've listed, in about 3 to 4 days, your FAFSA goes into processing, where they then, after it's processed, you get an email and they send a copy of your completed FAFSA to the schools you have listed here. And what you could then do is you could log back into your FAFSA on the 4th or 5th day, and you can navigate directly to the school list, and you're allowed to then remove colleges that you've already reported for and add more schools that you now want to report for FAFSA. So let's say I've already done all my SUNY and CUNYs, there's a bunch of private schools. Well, if I have an extra spot, I can go to add more schools and add more colleges and resubmit my FAFSA. If I have more than 10 schools, I could delete the previously listed 10 schools and then insert 10 more schools. So the choice is up to you. You just want to make sure that you've submitted the FAFSA at least one time, whether through the original application or through a correction, for each and every college that you know you're applying to that you're going to need financial aid for. So as long as you list them one time in a correction or in an update, they're going to get a copy of this FAFSA and they'll know that you applied for financial aid at their school. So I'm going to quickly run through housing plans. Most of your CUNYs are probably going to be with parent. SUNYs that are upstate, obviously you're going to be living upstate. So we're going to put on campus for those. And then our college selection process is pretty much done. And if you do have any questions, feel free to punch them into chat about any specific part of the FAFSA that we're at if you want to stop for a minute and talk a little bit more about a specific part of it. So now they're going to ask the student what's their marital status today. Sometimes parents are doing this for students, and I see them by accident marry their kids to like your dad or your mom, and the FAFSA just looks really weird. So they're asking you, the student, are you married? So you're going to say single. You're going to go next, assuming you're single. And then you're going to be able to then answer additional questions about your situation. Do you have children? If you don't have any kids, you can simply say no. Do you, the student, have dependents other than children or a spouse who you provide support for? Basically meaning, do you work and support people in your family? If not, you're going to say no. Then a bunch of other questions. Are we in the military? Are we a veteran of the military? Are we an orphan? Have we been in foster care? Do we live with a court-appointed legal guardian? All of these questions are trying to determine, do we have to file FAFSA as a dependent? This is why it's called the dependency questions. Or do we file FAFSA as an independent? Let's say, for example, I don't live with my parents, I live with my grandma, and my grandma is my court-appointed legal guardian. She has court papers saying she's my legal guardian. I can say yes to this question by checking it, and FAFSA would actually let me go forward, skipping the next two parts that are about my parents. So I wouldn't have to worry about answering about my grandma's taxes or anything like that, because having a legal guardian assigned by the court is enough of a special circumstance where you're going to be qualified to file for financial aid as an independent. If I live with my grandma, but she doesn't have guardianship over me, then you would want to talk to the folks at your high school who help you with the college process, because you may have different types of situations that could qualify you to be as an independent. And in some cases, they may still require your parents. In the next parts that we're going to talk about parents, they literally mean your parents, like your moms and dads. You're not allowed to use your grandma's information as a parent, your uncle's information as a parent, unless those people have adopted you. So if I'm in a situation where I live with a relative because of some situation in my family where I no longer live with my parents, maybe one of these situations apply, maybe they don't. You would want to make sure that Ms. Bensby, the folks that are helping you with the college process, will be able to assist you with, understanding whether or not you can qualify as an independent. You might need a letter from folks at your high school that talk about your circumstances, your situation. So we would want to make sure that we help you through to apply independently if you're qualified. Because if not, this last question here is asking, are we homeless? They're going to expect that we're going to be providing parent information in the next sections. Now, if I have another special circumstance that FAFSA didn't ask me about and I can't provide information about my parents, I can tell them I can't. But most students are going to be expected to provide information about parents. And now we're going to be talking about information about your parents' marital status. So now we've shifted from student questions to parent questions. Now they want to know about your parents' marital status. So there's different options. Maybe you have a single parent who was divorced or separated from your other parent. Maybe your parents are married and they live together. Maybe your parents never got married, but they still do live together. Depending on the status that you choose about your parents, they're going to either ask you about one parent or two. So let's say, for example, I say my parents were never married. They don't live together. I have a single parent. FAFSA is going to ask me, well, which parent am I going to be providing information for, my mother or father? You're supposed to use the information for the parent that you live with the most. So if we call this your custodial parent. So if you live with your mom primarily, even if you see your dad every now and then, but you mostly live in mom's house, then you would say I'm providing information only about mom. You're not going to need any information about your father in this example. But if my parents are together, they're not going to give me an option. They're going to ask me about both my parents. So I'll just show an example of a household where there's two parents. So let's say, let me actually go back and just talk about marriage, because if your parents are married or divorced, you're going to need a month and a year to put here. So they just want to know, how long have your parents been split up, or how long have your parents been married for? So you ask your parents, what was your wedding anniversary? And your mom says, oh, we got married in June in, 1995. And then, you would just basically put that month and year and you would keep moving forward. If you don't know it, check with your parents, because you want to make sure it's accurate, especially if it's very recent. Sometimes parents may have gotten married a year or two ago, so the dates could be important if they're very recent. If it's like years and years and years and they kind of remember, then you can put an estimate. So now they're going to ask us about our parents' information, and they're going to say, which first parent do we want to give, our father, mother, or step parent? Step parents would be included, for example, if my parent was remarried and I was telling them that my parent is remarried. So let's say your parent has a social, you would enter their social here. What if your parent doesn't have a social? Well, you're allowed to skip parent socials by entering all zeros. What you don't want to use for your parent social is a number like this, which is what we call a tax ID number. So if your parent doesn't have a social, but there's a number that they use to file taxes, FAFSA is not asking your parent to put their tax number, they're asking them to put their social. So if your parent doesn't have a social and they say, no, I just have a number I use for taxes, you would still put zeros. Now this is going to be important because FAFSA is going to be checking our parents, when we try to retrieve their taxes, when they sign. So we're going to have to make sure that we put the right social for our parents if they have one, because it also needs to be the social that's associated with their FSA ID. And if our parents don't have one, it's not a test, or, they're not going to be looking. There's no question on here that says, are your parents, what is their immigration status? What is their citizenship? They do not look at your parent's status on here. So just because you put zeros for social doesn't mean that they know that your parent is of a certain immigration status. They just want to know whether your parent has a social or not. So you're going to enter that number, either zeros, or you're going to enter that number that they actually have. And then we're going to put.
Can I just add one or two comments to that quickly? Yep. Just the other thing to point out is that if parent has a social security that was issued through DACA, basically a social security number that allows them to work, that shouldn't go in here either. So I know it's called social security number, but we want to sort of leave that out of the FAFSA, right? So in that situation, Michael, would you recommend all zeros as well?
Yep. So if your parent has a social security number associated with like a citizenship or permanent resident status, that's what they're looking at. But if they don't have, if there's a social that's just being used for taxes or a tax ID number, then we're typically putting zeros. We don't have to include that.
The other thing I like to tell students is just to double check. Often students take the social security numbers off of their parents' tax documents, but I have seen accountants make mistakes in the past. So it's ideal if you have a copy of the social security card so that you can make sure that it's getting it correct.
Yep, so the question came up is, what if you can a parent choose not to use their social? And the answer is actually yes. If a parent does not want to use their social, they don't have to. So it's not a requirement where you have to give your social, but you have to put something in the box. So if my parent says, I don't want to put my social on there, then you can enter all zeros. Now, it doesn't mean that they're still not going to want my parents' income and other information. I still have to give them my parents' name. I still have to give them their date of birth. I still have to report if they work and if they file taxes. But you're not required to have to enter a parent social, but it does make it easier if you want to use it, because I'm going to show you two things. You can download your parents' taxes through their social, and you could also sign it electronically through their social by creating an FSA ID for your parent. So if your parent doesn't want to use their social on your FAFSA, you won't be able to do those electronic options, and you'll have a little bit of a longer, harder application process. So we're going to just put an example here of entering a social. We're going to put our second parent's information, and then we're just going to keep moving forward, put their date of birth, and that's that. So now they want to know how my parents lived in New York for at least 5 years. Same thing. You would pretty much put what we put for the student. If they've been living here for a very long time, yes. If not, you're going to put the month and the year. We covered that already in the student section. Now they want to know our household. FAFSA knows we have two parents, and they know we have a student, me, the person who's filling out FAFSA. So there's already 3 of us. They know that. But they don't know how many brothers or sisters I have. They also don't know if there are other people that live in my house who my parents are taking care of, like maybe one of my younger cousins or something like that. So right here in this question, they want to know how many other children, even if they don't live with my parents, who my parents are responsible for financially, that they pay for. So let's say I have like 2 or 3 other siblings. I have 2 brothers and a sister. I would put 3. And they know now we're a household of 6. There's 2 parents and 4 kids. Let's say one of my brothers, though, is actually like 30 years old. He works, he does his own taxes, but he has his own little apartment in the basement with his own entrance, with his own bathroom. And I basically don't see him, and except for dinners or whatever. He's basically someone who lives with us, but he's his own kind of in his own financial situation. My parents don't put him on taxes. They're not really, supporting him. Maybe he even gives my parents money to help pay for their rent. I wouldn't include an older sibling like that. But let's say my brother is 19, he's in college, he's off at college right now. When he's off from college, he's back home. During the summer, he's home. And then when there's college, he's back at college. I would include him because my parents are probably still paying for him, helping to pay for college and stuff like that. If my younger brother is like 5 years old, then I'm definitely including him here because he's definitely relying on my parents. Now, if I have other people that live with me, it's the same rule. Do these people who live with me, who are not my siblings, are they being supported by my parents? Let's say my grandma and grandpa live with me. and my mom and dad do support them and they put them on their taxes, then I would include grandma and grandpa. But if grandma and grandpa live with us but do their own thing, they file their own taxes, they support themselves, they get their own benefits, then I wouldn't include them. So we're always using that as a test. You know, do the people that live with me, are they relying on my parents, and do my parents typically claim them on their taxes? Because that's what colleges are going to be checking. If I say that I have, you know, some people say like they literally have like 20 people in their house, and the colleges may not believe that your parents are paying for every person that lives in your house. So they may want you to itemize, give them a list of who are you listing, how old are they? So just be careful with how many people you list. Are they really financially dependent on your parents? Are they really living in your household? You know, or are they a younger child who maybe doesn't live with your parents? Maybe they're at boarding school or something like that, but your parents still are supporting them. Now they want to know how many people in my parents' house, except for the parents, will be going to college next year. Some students will literally put this and then go next and then get a red message. And then they say, Mr. Turner, why is it not letting me go forward? And then I look at the student and I'm like, there's at least one person in your house that's going to college next year. That's you, the person who's going to college. So the minimum answer to this question should be one, you, the student. But if you have your brothers in college, maybe like I said, your 19-year-old older brother's in college, you would include him. So next year it's going to be you in college and your older brother. You wouldn't include your mom in this number. So if you're going to college and your mom's in college, then you would say one, just you can't include your parents. So now we're going to go next. And so now we're up to what probably is going to be the most difficult part of the application, I'm sure, which some of you were waiting to find out about, which is going to be the taxes. So the first thing they want to know about our parents is, did they file already a 2019 income tax? So that's the most recent tax return that people filed. It's not 2020. A lot of people keep asking, can they use 2020? They lost their jobs. We'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, they just want to know, did my parents file 2019 taxes? And it's a pretty straightforward answer. They already did it. They still need to do it, or they're not going to do it. Let's say my mom didn't work last year. She's on disability. She got hurt at work a few years ago. She's been out of work ever since. She gets Social Security benefits, other benefits to help support my family, but she doesn't work. She doesn't do taxes. I would just simply say she's not going to file her taxes. When we go next, FAFSA is still going to ask me, if my parents don't file taxes, did they earn any money from working last year? Now, I said already, my mom is disabled. She doesn't have a job. She hasn't worked in many years. All I would simply do is enter zeros for her income, or her and my dad's income, and go next. They don't work. They don't file taxes. FAFSA is going to say, well, your parents don't do taxes. They don't work. There's really nothing else we need to know about them. Do you want to skip the rest of the questions? And you'll say yes, and they bring you all the way to the end. They're going to skip the rest of the questions about your parents' finances. So all these questions about taxes and, you know, special lines on their taxes and income, all skipped. Now we're basically at the sign part of the FAFSA. They don't even want to know about the student. They don't want to know if the student worked or anything like that. You're allowed to do it this way, but if you submit your FAFSA this way, you have to look out, because your college may send you requests for information when they're reviewing your FAFSA to find out, you said your parent doesn't work, your parent doesn't file taxes. How does your parent support themselves? And that's where you would tell your colleges that your parent gets Social Security benefits or public assistance or other types of benefits that support them. So your FAFSA would be really easy in that case. But what about the students here whose parents do file taxes? So in that case, we would go back to that question and we would say, my parents already did do their taxes. And they're going to ask, well, what type of income taxes do your parents file? Most people who live and work in the US will file an IRS 1040. So you can say that. If my parents were living and working in another country, I could use the second option, foreign. Or if my parents were living and working in Puerto Rico last year, or the US Virgin Islands or something like that, then I would put the third option. So most of you, I'm going to assume, are going to be using IRS 1040. And they want to know, how do our parents file their taxes? They file them as single, head of household. So this is where you're wondering, okay, I don't know that. Where do I find that information? And that's a really good question. I want to point your attention to these blue question mark bubbles. If there's ever a question about finances and you have no idea what they're talking about, you have no idea where to find it, these question mark bubbles are going to be your best friend. I click on a question mark bubble and they're going to show me an actual image of my parents' taxes. And they're going to say, look, if you're trying to find how your parents filed their taxes, look at their 1040, look at this part up here in red. there's a box that they check: single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, widower. So now I know I'm going to dig out my parents' tax returns and I can see, okay, they checked off head of household. So then I go back to FAFSA and I'll just simply put head of household. In this case, we're doing an example of a married family. So let's say the parents file married jointly. Now, depending on how your parents file taxes, you may or may not be given this additional option to link to the IRS. If you are given this option, you definitely want to click on it, because what this allows us to do is it allows us to transfer our parents' tax information from the IRS to your FAFSA, making the job of filling out FAFSA a whole lot easier. But in order to use this option, one of my parents must have an FSA ID. And if they don't have one, then what I can do is choose one of my parents. Let's say I'm going to use parent one, my mom. And then I can go create an FSA ID with my mom. It would bring me to the same FSA ID website. And then my mom would fill this out. She would make a username, password, and everything like that. And once she made her account, she would then use it. And then she would go next, and it would link her to the IRS. What if your parent already has an account but doesn't remember it? Well, they have a button for that. It's called forgot username and forgot password. So you can try to recover your mom's account. Sometimes your mom's account may have been locked. Maybe your older brother made your mom's account and has no idea what he used to make your mom's account. So you're going to try to work that out on the FSA ID website. You know, go to manage. I always recommend starting by recovering your mom's username. You can answer the questions that were set up to make your mom's username, put in her social, her last name. They'll ask you some questions that you set up, that your brother or her set up. And if you can answer them, they give you her username. And then once you get her username, you then be able to go back and then you can try to recover her password. You can recover her password by using her username. So I would go forgot password. I have my mom's username. I know her birthday. And then I go continue. And then you follow the process to recover your mom's password. If you're so stuck, you have no idea what's your mom's account or anything like that, then you're going to have to contact them for help, because the only way that they can help you, there's this green help button here, is they'll have to do the reset for you, and you have to call them during business hours. So you would kind of read through these tips here, and then eventually they should be able to give you their contact information in order to get them. So like some of the questions here, right? It says call 1-800-4-FED Aid, and that's where you would call them to get help with that. So if you can use this option, it's a really good option. It's going to basically download our parents' tax information. I'll just show you the site that I'm using doesn't really demonstrate it, but I'll show you an image of what it looks like. So when you are using it, after you log in with your parents' FSA ID, they're going to give you a pop-up message that you're being transferred. And then what it'll do is it'll give you a screen like this where you're on the IRS website, you put your parents' name, their date of birth, how they file their taxes. And then the IRS data retrieval tool could actually then find all the tax information that's required. So it would look, you know, it looks a little different than this, but it would tell you, we found all this information about your parents' taxes. Do you want to transfer it? You would click that you want to transfer it. And then when they bring you back, all of these tax questions would be filled out. So any tax questions about what was line this, what was line that, would automatically be filled out by the IRS. So I definitely recommend that you use that option. The FSA ID, if you made it very, very long time ago, it may have been before the FSA ID was even around. Some people who did FAFSA a long time ago had something called a FAFSA Pin number. The PIN numbers are expired. They no longer use them. So I would try to create a new account if it's been more than 5 years. If it's been less than 5 years, you probably do have an FSA ID, and then I would try resetting it, seeing if you're in the system. And if you try to reset it and it says your social is not found, then it means you don't have one. So you could just basically go through the process of just making a new account, because if you're trying to reset an account that doesn't exist, then you just need to make a new one. Now, if you can't use the IRS data retrieval tool and you got to go through all of those questions yourself, then you definitely want to make sure that you use the blue question mark bubbles. They're going to be your best friend. This wants to know, what was my parents' adjusted gross income? Okay, I have no idea what that is. So I click on my question mark bubble. And once again, I'm going to have a nice image of a tax return. And they're going to say, look, find this line here, number 8B. That's the number they want you to put on the FAFSA. So I'm looking at my parents' taxes. Okay, boom, I found it. So now I'm going to just put it in here, you know, and then go next. Now they want to know, how much did each of my parents earn from working last year? Looks like a lot of language. Maybe I don't understand all those line references. Blue question mark bubble, come to the rescue. So they're going to explain, to take a look at my parents' taxes. If I scroll down, they're going to say, look, on this line of your parents' taxes, it says line 1 is their wages. If your parent doesn't have any wages, because let's say they own their own business or they're a contractor, like for example, they drive Uber, then they may have something called a Schedule 1, where they would have business income, or if your mom and dad's a farmer, they would have farm income. Not too many farmers in New York City, but it's possible. There are also other places where they could find their wages. Now, sometimes your parents' wages in line 1 of their taxes are included together because your parents both work and they file their taxes together. So when you look at line 1, it's going to have the total of mom and dad's wages. And the help text talks about that too. So they're going to tell you to look at your parents' W-2 forms in order to figure out how much money from this line 1 belongs to each of your parents. So if both my parents, let's say my mom worked for Macy's and my dad works for IBM, my dad would have a W-2 form from IBM showing that in his wages, he earned $50,000, and my mom would have her W-2 from Macy's showing that she earned $20,000 and their joint income was 70. So I would be able to kind of break that out and be able to know here how much belongs to one parent, how much belongs to another parent, and you do the best that you can. So sometimes, you may make an error here, but if your parents are waged employees, it is fairly easy. Sometimes they may have more than one W-2. Your mom had 3 jobs last year, so you're going to add up all 3 of her W-2s to figure out what her wages were, and then put in your dad's for the second parent. It's up to you. Keep in mind, you already told FAFSA who was parent 1 and who was parent 2. So you don't want to lose sight that parent 1 is your mom and that parent 2 is your dad. So make sure that you remember who's parent 1, who's parent 2. So we're going to basically enter their wages, and then we're going to keep moving forward. Now they want to know, did they file a Schedule 1? Now remember, if I did the IRS retrieval, a lot of these questions would be automatically answered for me. I'm showing you what happens if you can't retrieve their taxes or you're answering yourself. Once again, I have no idea what's a Schedule 1. Blue question mark bubble, please save me. And they're going to tell me about what a Schedule 1 is and where to look. So basically what they would say is that if I transfer from IRS, this would be here, but they would tell me to look for the Schedule 1 form to report any income or adjustments. They would have a page, the previous help box had it. So this is what a Schedule 1 would look like. So does my parents' taxes include this page? If it doesn't, or if they have it, but it's blank, it means they don't use it or they didn't have it, then I'm going to say no. If they did, then I would say yes. If I don't know, they also give me an option to say I don't know. Then they may ask, are my parents a dislocated worker? That means, are they currently unemployed? So did they recently lose their job? Maybe they did because of the pandemic. Let's say one of them did lose their jobs. When you're filling out FAFSA, you have to use their old income, but you're allowed to contact your colleges later on if your family income is no longer true on this FAFSA because your parent lost their job or something like that. Saying yes to the dislocated worker question helps notify the college that you may have an unemployed parent. So you definitely want to say yes to that. But you also have to be responsible to call your college and ask them, well, what's the process of getting my income changed on FAFSA? What do I have to send my college? Because your college does have the ability to consider your family's current finances as opposed to last year. Now, if your family didn't lose their job, they weren't affected like that, then you would just obviously report their income information as is. But if their family income did change, then you want to fill out FAFSA as is, but find out from your college what's the process to get help with getting my family income adjusted. So definitely be aware of that. Now, if your parents aren't, dislocated, they're still working, then there may be additional questions. Does anyone in my household, either last year or this year, get any of these benefits? Medicaid, SSI, SNAP, which is food assistance, free or school lunch, free or reduced price school lunch, temporary aid for needy families, which is basically public assistance, and WIC benefits. So if, let's say I get Medicaid for the kids for their health insurance, they get free school lunch, we get food assistance, then I would indicate those and I would go next. If I don't get any of these, I would put none of the above. So it's totally up to you. Depending on the answers to these questions, they may have more questions about your parents' finances. Depending on the answers to those questions, they may be done with you and they may offer you the option to skip. If you're ever offered the option to skip, you can always say yes. So in this point, I've told FAFSA, I'm pretty much from a low-income family. We get some benefits like Medicaid, food assistance. My parents don't make very much from work. FAFSA doesn't really need to know any more about my family's finances. They're letting me skip. But if I'm telling them that my parents' income is not that great, but we really don't get any benefits, FAFSA may still want to learn more about my family's finances. Or if my family income is higher, they want to know more about my family's finances. So once again, more tax questions, more question mark bubble, trying to find the lines that they're asking me to look for. Or if I already transferred from the IRS, this would be already filled out from the IRS data retrieval tool. I wouldn't have to worry about it. The rest of these questions that may come up for some of you, not all of you, just read through them and see if any of them apply to your parents. For example, combat pay. So I'm reading this question about combat pay, and I would hit question mark bubble. They would tell me combat pay is money that somebody gets from the military when they're in an active duty war zone. So I look at my mom, I say, Mom, are you currently stationed or were you ever stationed in Iraq or Afghanistan? Did you ever serve in a war zone? And my mom says, no, I'm not even in the military. Why are you asking me that silly question? So I know already, okay, we don't get this, it's zero. So I'm going to kind of read through this. Does my parent get any kind of college grant or scholarship aid that they report to the IRS in their income? My parent doesn't even go to college, so I'm going to put zero for that. And then you kind of read through these questions and use the question mark bubble where appropriate. See where it points you out in their taxes. Do they have anything in these lines? If they don't even have the schedule or there's nothing in there, it's zero, then I would leave it at zero. For a great many of you, these lines are probably going to be zero. But it depends on the individual family situation. So they want to know, do any of my parents pay child support? So let's say my parent got divorced or separated and one of the kids lives with another parent and my parent pays child support for them, I would indicate that. There's a question on the next screen if my parent gets child support for their kids. So if I come from a single parent household and I receive child support last year in 2019, I would indicate how much did I get for the whole year. So let's say I got $100 a month for my kid. I would put that I got $1,200 for the year, whatever the appropriate number is. Some people are like, I never get child support. Okay, well, zero is an answer. You can put zero. Now they want to know, is your parent clergy or military, and do they get housing assistance or other living expenses paid for them? So my parent's not in the military. They're not a pastor or anything like that. So that's zero. Do they contribute to their job's retirement plan? So that would be in their W-2 form. Once again, my mom says, yeah, I think I do put a little bit of my paycheck away to our job's retirement plan. They tell you where to look. Look at your W-2 form from 2019. In this box 12, do you have these codes, D, E, F, G, H, and S? If so, you should be putting whatever that amount is in this box right here. So let's say they saved $1,000 towards retirement last year. And then everything else we're going to kind of read through and see if it applies. Do you get VA benefits, stuff like that? So if it's no, we leave it at zero. So here we're going to be allowed to, either skip or answer questions about our parents' assets. So they want to know, do my parents have assets that exceed $7,900? I'm like, well, what do they mean by assets? So I click on that and they say, do they have money in their cash savings accounts? Do they have businesses? Do they have other investments or real estate like rental property or stuff like that where they may have certain assets? If they do, is it worth more than $7,900? If they do, but it's not, I would say no. If they don't even have any assets, they don't barely have any savings, then I would say no. If they do, they would say yes. And they would then have to try to give their best estimate of what they currently have in things like cash savings checking, what they have in investments, what they have in terms of business, but there's some restrictions. So for investments, for example, they say, do not include your parents' home. And if I click on the question mark bubble again, they're going to tell me what kind of investments they want and what kind of investments they don't want. So for example, they wouldn't want retirement account balances. They're not going to want life insurances. So there's include and there's investments don't include. So you want to make sure that you read that carefully for your parents if they do have certain assets. So let's say our parents don't really have that much money. We're going to go next. So the one key thing here, we're getting toward the end of FAFSA, is it's gonna look like now they're asking us tax questions again. But I wanna make sure that you notice that it's not asking about our parents anymore, it's asking about the student. One big mistake that I see students still make to this day is they then go in and they say, yeah, we did taxes, we did a 1040, and we did them as married. And they end up repeating their parents' income a second time. You already put your parents' income. They don't want to know about your parents' income anymore. They want to know about you, the student. Did you work and file taxes for 2019? If you work, but maybe you didn't even file taxes, you're just going to say you're not going to file. And you're going to go next. FAFSA will ask you, the student, did you earn any money from work last year? I didn't have any job last year. My parents are the ones who work and pay for everything. I put 0. What if I did have a job? I did SYEP, I did summer youth, and I had a little internship or something, and I got like $1,200 over the summer. You would typically know because your job would have given you that same W-2 statement like we spoke about for your parents. If you worked the job on the books where you got paid and you've got your income reported, you would have had one of these from your job that they also gave a copy to the IRS, and you'd want to report how much wages and everything else you earned based on your job in the summer of 2019. Some people ask me, oh, I just started working, so do I have to put that? No, if you started working, that's 2020. They don't want to know about 2020, they want to know about 2019. So if you just started working 2 months ago, you would leave this at 0 because you didn't work last year. So we're gonna go next, and then a lot of these questions, they're not gonna really even apply to you. So a lot of these would be 0, you don't have these kind of benefits. They're gonna ask, do you have any money in the bank? I say 50 bucks. So, you know, whatever it is, you would report, or if it lets you skip, you can skip. So once you've survived the income section, you do your best, you fill it out, hopefully you can retrieve your taxes. They're gonna ask you, are you a preparer? Preparer means, are you someone doing this FAFSA for someone else? So did someone pay you to fill out FAFSA for them? You're doing FAFSA for yourself. So you're gonna say no, you're gonna go next. Now you get a chance to review. So you're gonna look at all the questions and answers. Everything looks good. If not, I can click on the question and go back. So I review everything and then I go next. Now I sign FAFSA. To sign it, there's 2 options. You could sign it electronically or on paper. The first person who signs is the student. You're gonna hit agree, you're gonna go next. And then if you've already entered your username and password on FAFSA, there would simply be the sign button. But if not, they would then ask the student for their FSA ID username and password, and you would click sign. If you wanted to sign this on paper, you can use this other options link to then choose to sign it on paper. Same thing for my parent. My parent would then sign. If they have a username and password, I would enter my parent's username and password here, and we would click sign. If they don't have a FSA ID because they didn't want to use their social, or they didn't have a social or whatever, we can choose to print a page for us to sign. Now you notice FAFSA is not letting me submit. They're giving me a print a signature page button because they want to make sure that I go and I print this page that I need to sign and send to them. So this is the page that we're going to print. There'll be a line for a student to sign, a line for the parent to sign. Remember, this is only if you choose not to sign electronically. So we really do recommend you both sign electronically. But if your parent can't, for example, then you may not have to sign for the student. You may just have to sign for the parent. They give you the address where to send this page to. So you're going to choose to print it. You go through your printer dialog, you print that out, and then you close this. Now, because we've printed our page, they let us submit our FAFSA. So everything is done, you feel good, you hit submit, and congratulations, your FAFSA is done. Now, this is what we call the confirmation page, which gives you an explanation of what kind of financial aid you qualify for. So if you click on these little tabs here, you can learn a little bit more about different types of aid programs. You can also see the schools you listed and things like that. There's a very important link on here that I want you to look out for. It's not in our example here, but I'm going to bring you to an image of what it looks like. So once you're on this confirmation page, you really want to be careful to not close this out, because on here, there's going to be a link that will let you continue on to the New York State application, is what we call the TAP application. So I'm just going to quickly bring up a little presentation to show you how this works. So I'm going to switch my share for a moment. This is pretty much the last thing we're going to be talking about. But I want to make sure that you don't lose sight, because this is the next step. So now that we've done our federal, we want to make sure that we continue on and we do our state. So I'm going to be showing you just a little PowerPoint here. And so this is our confirmation page. And on your confirmation page, you want to make sure that you scroll up and down. There's going to be a link on here, a big blue button that says start your state application to apply for New York State-based financial aid. So what they're letting us do now, knowing that we live in New York, and if I also told FAFSA I want to go to college in New York, they're giving us the option to transfer over right now from FAFSA over to New York State. So you're going to get a window warning, you're changing your website, and a new window is going to pop up, and you're going to have this application in a separate internet browser window, and this is going to be your New York application for financial aid. So this would then allow you to then start the process for filing for what we call TAP. So you would click start your application, and you would go through this process of creating an account, following all the instructions, creating your own username, PIN name, and then moving forward into what we call the TAP application. So the common question we get here is from some of you, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come up already, sometimes people will ask us, well, what happens if we did our FAFSA and for whatever reason, we didn't click that button on the FAFSA to transfer over to New York State? Well, what you can do is you can go directly to the state website. If it's been at least, about 5 days or so since you last filed FAFSA, you can go directly to the state application by going to our homepage, which is hesc.ny.gov. And in the middle, there's going to be a link that says, if you scroll up and down, it says all about TAP. So that's the application I'm looking for. I forgot to do my TAP application after I did my FAFSA. So I click on all about TAP. There'll be all this language about eligibility and an image about how it was supposed to apply through FAFSA. But in the bottom here, it'll say apply now. So I would click apply now, and then you'll notice it's going to bring me to the same website that I missed before at the end of my FAFSA. So if you did miss the link at the end of your FAFSA, make sure that you go directly to hesc.ny.gov. You click on all about TAP on the home page, and then you look for the apply now button. So that's basically how you would be able to get to the state application from there. The one thing I want to highlight about the state application that's really, really important, well, there's a couple things, but the common question that we get about this is there's an issue where on FAFSA, you were allowed to share the names of different colleges you were applying to. When you are applying for state financial aid through the TAP application, we only let you apply for one college. So when you're doing your state form, you'll notice there'll only be one school listed on here. And sometimes students are like, wait, I'm applying to like 10 different schools. Why is there only one CUNY or one SUNY or one private school on here? And the reason is we only let you apply for state financial aid for one school at a time. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to do 10 TAP applications. It just means that for now, I have to apply for whatever my top choice college in New York is. If it's not Syracuse, as in the example here, then I could put will not attend, and there's a search option that will let me search and replace whatever school I want to list as my top choice preferred college in New York. If later on I don't get into this college, there's a way on our website where you could change the name that you've listed, which typically students would do in the springtime once they're settled on what college they're going to. The rest of this application is not terribly difficult. The one thing I'll highlight is that if your parents do file taxes, it does ask for their line 37 of their New York state taxes. So you want to make sure that when you're filing for New York financial aid, you don't only have their federal tax returns, but you also have parent state tax returns, because they're going to be asking about their New York taxes on the New York application for TAP. They could also ask about parent, instead of socials, we do take tax ID numbers. So that's another key difference. If your parent doesn't have a social, you may have put zeros on FAFSA. You can actually enter your parent's tax ID number on TAP. And pretty much the rest of it is self-explanatory when you're going through. The signature process, you can either sign electronically if your parent has a DMV issued license, like a driver's license, a learner's permit, or a non-driver's license. If they don't, they could sign on paper. And the paper form, you can either mail it, or I recommend waiting. Once your TAP application is reviewed and processed, you'll get an email saying that we're looking for your parent's signature, and there'll be a link that you can upload it to through your account with us, where we could then electronically accept the page that you submit, and then we would then apply their signature. Students sign just by typing their name. You don't need an ID or anything like that. And then you submit your state application. So The state one we kind of went through fairly quickly, but you want to make sure the key takeaways is that you are looking for the link on FAFSA. If you haven't finished FAFSA, making sure that you transition from your FAFSA to your TAP application, or if you did miss it, I showed you that there's a way of getting it directly on our website. And also making sure that you know that difference with the one college and that you have to use your parents' New York taxes as part of that application process as opposed to the federal. So does anyone have any questions? I know I was answering some of a handful of questions that were coming in through the chat, or anything, Jasmine, you want to cover that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to think. I mean, it's impossible to capture all of the questions that would comprise everybody's unique financial situation. One of the things, though, I was thinking when you were filling out FAFSA was if you could just speak briefly about how people should handle it if there is a savings account that's in their child's name, or if they do have any money set aside through, I forget what the name of the state
The
account is.
529s?
Yeah.
So remember, we looked quickly at the parent asset, and then they also asked the students. So if parents have their own savings account, checking account, things like that, they report that on FAFSA. But remember, it depends on the value, because FAFSA will sometimes ask us that test question. They'll say, the example we saw was $7,900. So let's say my parents do have savings and checking accounts, but they only have like $500. Then typically we're not answering those questions. We can skip it. But let's say in addition to my parents' savings and checking accounts, they have other investments, like a 529 college savings plan for me, or my grandma has a trust fund or something for me, or other types of programs. The FAFSA has a section where they want to know specifically what monies belong to parents. And then we saw before, they also have a part where they want to know what monies belong to the student. So if a student has their own bank accounts set up maybe under custodial arrangement right now because they're a minor, or they have a trust fund that someone set up for them that they get the money later on when they're an adult, those monies would be included in the student asset questions, the student savings and checking account balances, the student investments. But if my parents started a 529 savings program for me, that's actually not considered student money, that's parent money. Because my parents are the owner of that account, even though it's going to my college, it's still technically my parents' investment. So any 529s a parent has would go into the parent investment line on the FAFSA and would be subject to that question, right? The $7,900. So if my parents have $10,000 saved up for me for college in a 529, I would have to answer yes to that question. Yes, it's more than 7,000, and I would have to disclose how much we have saved. That, kind of savings account wouldn't really ruin the chances of a student getting financial aid unless it was substantial. If my parents have $500,000 saved for my college, that might really negatively impact a college's view on whether I need financial aid for their school or not. Because with $500,000 in college savings, I could pretty much afford to go whatever school I want to go to. If most people have saved like 10, 15, 20,000 up to this point, if even that much, those numbers really don't move the needle too much in terms of disqualifying a student for financial aid. But it is important that you report it and that you do your best to represent every kind of savings or holdings that you have, so they don't think that you're being dishonest in the process.
Thank you. Another question that I was thinking might be on some people's minds is just deadlines and when you would advise that people complete FAFSA and what the benefit of completing it earlier in the process would be.
Sure. So yeah, FAFSA has been available for over a month now, and it's definitely within your interest to get it done as soon as possible. A lot of people wait to file it thinking that they have to first apply for admission at college. You don't. As long as as long as we know a few names of colleges, we can always start our FAFSA and submit it now. And the goal is to get it early because, one, colleges do have deadlines. You want to make sure that you're getting it in well ahead of your college's deadline. And also there are some programs where there's a limited pool of funding. So for example, work study, SEOG grants, there are different programs where colleges have only a small pool of funds, and the students who apply earlier on time are usually first in line for those funds. Students who apply late, who miss deadlines, would typically miss out on different opportunities because funding may just simply run out. So it's always in the student's best interest to apply as early as possible. Even if the deadline, you look at a college's website and the deadline is not until January, it's also just good to get it off of your list. You have so many other things you have to worry about for college right now, essays and transcripts and tests and stuff like that. And FAFSA is just about your family's finances. Once you pretty much get it done, it's done. And then you kind of sit back and then you update as needed, or you follow up with the financial aid office request as needed. So it is a quick thing to get off your list right now and just be one less thing to worry about.
All right, thank you. I guess I just want to encourage anyone that is here to ask any questions that they might have. This is your opportunity to ask the world's foremost leading expert on financial aid. Anything that you have to ask. I give you that. Do you like your new title? No,
yeah,
but
that's my email signature. My bosses be like, yeah, this guy's getting way far ahead of himself.
He's getting a big head. No, but you do have an expert here. So if anyone has any questions, I really want to encourage you guys to just unmic yourself and ask away. And if not, then we will let Michael go back to his life. But I'm just going to give, 30 seconds for people to gather their thoughts and ask any questions that they might have. All right, I'm not seeing anything come up in the chat box. I hope that folks are walking away from this feeling a little bit more empowered or equipped to tackle their FAFSA, and just sort of knowing where to look if you do have any questions. What I would encourage everyone to do, I will be available to a certain extent to support students in the completion of their FAFSA. In the past, I held a workshop where we had a bunch of volunteers come in and then sit down with folks and help them complete FAFSA. I don't see a way of doing that with COVID and the limitations that we have on sort of like, public gatherings. And so it's going to be easier, I think, on everyone if you start the FAFSA on your own and go through as much of it as you can. But the one thing I would like to say is that while you are completing your FAFSA, you run into any roadblocks or hiccups, or you have any questions, and you don't feel confident on clicking submit, let me know and we can always schedule a shorter check-in, or we can go over any of your remaining questions together, make sure you're answering everything make sure you're answering everything correctly, and then just go ahead and click submit on it. So that's how I'm going to encourage students this year. Fill as much of it as you can out on your own, and then if you need support or have questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to schedule some time to look at it with you. Yeah, I think that's sort of it for my information. So I guess that concludes FAFSA for tonight. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time and for being here.
Not a problem. Always a pleasure. All right. Good night, everyone.
All right. Bye, everyone.